So welcome back to the workshop and to part 4 of this electric mandolin build series. Now the first 3 episodes have really been about woodwork, the actual construction of the mandolin itself. This episode, episode number 4, is really about converting that piece of woodwork into a musical instrument. So I'm doing the final details, making the tailpiece, making the bridge, mounting the pickups, and last but definitely not least, because it takes a phenomenal amount of time, and that's reflected in this video, is the setting up of it, getting the action right, the intonation, etc. So there's a lot to see, so let's crack on, shall we? So I'm just going to start work on the tailpiece for the electric mandolin. Why make one, I hear you say? Well, simply, I actually enjoy making as much of the instrument for myself as I can, rather than going out and buying something that you just bolt on. The other thing is, with the tailpiece, I like to make a tailpiece which suits ball end strings, and that way you can choose any electric guitar string, vast array of electric guitar strings out there, and you just simply don't have that choice with the loop end strings. And with the electric guitar strings, it allows me to make up a kind of a custom gauge set, because what I like to do on the electric mandolins, what I've found works, is to have maybe slightly heavier treble strings and slightly lighter bass strings, and that way you can kind of tailor the output of the magnetic pickup. So the tailpiece itself is made from this angled aluminium, this lovely extruded aluminium. Now, there's nothing really spectacular about the making of this. It's simply hard work and trying to work as accurately as you can. Marking out, drilling holes, cutting, sawing, filing, all basic really hand skills. So yeah, let me kind of show you how this evolves. And here it is, the finished tailpiece. Let me come a little bit closer for you. So you can see obviously the holes for the strings, countersunk so the strings don't dig into it. The ball ends are firmly anchored against that back surface. The shape is really purely to my aesthetic taste. And of course we've got the holes in here to take the fixing screws. Now one word, or a number of words about these fixing screws. Now if you want your instrument to have an air of quality about it, if you want to say, well look, I'm a luthier, I make stuff better than you can buy elsewhere, there's got to be something that sets it apart. Now you could just drill holes in there, use round head screws to fit it down, maybe use countersink screws if you're feeling, particularly adventurous. But what I like to use are these raised head screws, and with the raised head screws what I do is I not only countersink the holes, but I also counterbore them so that the screw will sit really neatly and cleanly within that hole. Nothing sticking up for the player to catch themselves on, and it looks really kind of slick. It's obviously another couple of processes. And is it worth the effort, I hear you ask, when all you're going to do is really screw it onto the body? Well, yeah, I think it is worth the effort, because, as luthiers, this is the extra kind of step that we're meant to take, this extra attention to the minute detail which sets us apart from nameless factories. So yeah, if you ask my advice, pay attention to the finest details on your instruments and you'll get a better quality product at the end of it. Yeah, so here ends today's lesson. Now, I've got a piece of ebony somewhere, need to make that bridge. So I'm making the bridge out of this lovely piece of ebony here. I've set my jig up, ready to route the slot to take a tusk saddle. So there we have it, one neat slot to take the saddle. And you'll notice that the slot is slightly offset. This is to compensate for the fact that bridges on mandolins want to tilt forward a little bit. So I just tried to take the centre of the saddle back a little bit to hopefully eliminate that. Okay, so there is the finished bridge. Obviously the slot and the hole here for the wire for the under saddle transducer. That front edge I just chamfer back slightly so that it makes the whole bridge just look a tad lighter. So the idea then is that the transducer wire goes in through the bridge, and of course I've got to drill a hole in the body at some point. That sits on in there, and then the saddle on top, and the saddle of course will be shaped for intonation, height of action, etc. when I'm setting it up. But yeah, that's as much as I can do on the bridge at this stage. Just trying to design my method of mounting this pickup. What I'm going to do is not have a pickup surround, but mount it directly to the body. I mean, back in the day when I used to teach design, I was very insistent that the students drew everything out first before they actually made anything. But these days I do a little bit of sketching, and most of the design work is kind of done in a three-dimensional way by actually making the object at the same time. I guess you're making a prototype, and if the prototype works, you use it. If it doesn't, you make another one. But the idea is I'm going to have this kind of little plywood plate, some kind of spacers here, and inside those spacers will be these tiny little threaded inserts. I've got these really nice kind of button head Allen screws, so they're going to go through into the inserts, and I'll have some foam or springs, or maybe springs the other side, offering resistance to push the pickup up, and I should just be able to adjust it then with an Allen key, which will look really neat and sleek with those little button head screws. Yeah, so that's what I'm about at the moment. So yes, it's kind of a bit of sketching, bit of making. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, start again. Okay. Right, so there is the kind of the fixing bracket, mounting device, whatever you want to call it. And I'd just like to say at this stage, making and designing this has probably taken me longer than cutting the neck joint, getting it lined up, fitting it in and gluing it. It just really shows you, once you start going off-road, once you start veering away from your basic standard designs, how much extra time a sort of a custom detail can take you. And you know, will your client understand that when you quote them for that extra work? Anyway, so we've got this kind of plywood base, a couple of little brass inserts here, threaded inserts, which take the button head socket screws, so I can tighten them up with an Allen key, and as I do that, it's compressing this closed cell foam, and of course the closed cell foam is pushing up that way in order to support the pickup. You'll see that I've put a couple of screws in here because really what I want to do is fit the pickup in there temporarily whilst I get the instrument set up, and if there's something I don't like about it, I'll obviously be able to unscrew it and take it out. Once I'm pleased, it will actually be glued in place. Yeah, so I think it's time to fit the pickup, and then of course get the mandolin set up and playing. it's all getting a bit exciting now. We should hear the mandolin sing for the first time soon. So what have we got? Tailpiece has been fixed down, just covered with a piece of masking tape to protect it whilst I'm working on it. The bridge is in position there. That tape is to stop the bridge sliding forward as I'm taking the tension off the strings and adjusting things. And this is my little kind of template, my gauge, which I always use to make sure that I've got the correct distance between the last fret, the 20th fret, and the front edge of the saddle there, so that's consistent on all of my mandolins. Underneath this piece of cloth here is the pickup. I've just put that piece of cloth on it just to protect it so that it keeps it clean, ready for when the mandolin is complete. And it's wired up to this sort of temporary circuit here. So I've only got 4 strings on. I find the initial setting up phase much easier with just the 4 strings. So the nut has been roughly cut, the saddle's been roughly cut, and when I look at this at the moment I can see that the saddle is probably slightly too high. So what I'll have to do is take a little bit off the bottom of the saddle, and then I can adjust it there at the nut. And it's this iterative process. You're going backwards and forwards between the saddle and the nut slots to get the action spot on. And then once the action has been sorted out, then you can fine tune the intonation. I mean, it's roughly filed to the shape that I want, so that the first strings will be breaking on the front edge of the saddle, and the last string here, the 8th string, will be breaking on the rear of the saddle here, so we get the compensation for the intonation. But that really fine tuning can only be done once the action is at the correct height. So yeah, a lot of toing and froing, so that's what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable. So if I press down at the first fret there and I measure the height of the action at the 13th fret using various gauges, I can see that the height there is 1.4 millimeters. And if I put it on the other side, I can see that the height there is about 1.3 millimeters. So it's not too far off, but what you've got to remember is that for every, I don't know, half a millimeter you want to lower it there, you've got to take it down a millimeter here. So although I've only got to take this down a fraction here, I've got to take it down 2 fractions there. So I'm going to start off by just taking a tiny bit off the bottom of the saddle to lower the whole of the saddle, and then I'll go back, check it again, and then maybe take some off the nut. So I've taken, I think it was about 0.6 to 0.5 off the bottom of the saddle there. If I hold the string down at the first now and check this at the 13th with this 1 millimeter gauge here, that is pretty much where I want it to be, just slightly over 1 mil there. Yeah, and just slightly over 1 mil there. So what I can now do is lower the action at the nut by filing the slots, and then once I'm kind of happy there, just keep checking backwards and forwards until it's spot on. So you use feeler gauges to measure the gap between the top of the fret and the underside of the string, and what I'm aiming for is 0.28 of a millimeter on the bass strings, and about 0.15 of a millimeter on that top treble string. So the gap between the underside of the string and the top of the fret gradually gets lower. That's why I can never quite understand the argument for 0 frets. I can understand it in a kind of production environment if you don't want to spend too much time setting the instruments up. But you know, for the individual luthier, This to me is the way you got to do it. And you know, people do say how comfortable my instruments are to play, how easy they are to play. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's the method that works for me. But yeah, so it's just a question of measuring, filing, measuring, filing, and then saying, yes, I'm there, eureka. Right, so that string I can lift over into the next slot and get to work on it with these gauged files. Right, so I'm happy with that one. So what I can do now is concentrate on the next one over. So I'll move the string over at the saddle, and then I can move it over at the nut there, measure the difference and the distance, and get this one sorted out. And one of the things I should say is when I'm using these slot files, I tend to file the majority of it at the same angle as the head, so that the string breaks on the front edge of the nut. Otherwise you might find that the string tends to rattle and buzz in the nut if it breaks on the back edge of it. So yeah, yeah, let's do that one. Yeah, so the back edge, and then just lower it a bit at the front. Bit of abrasive paper, just clean any debris out. I like to just also give it a bit of a brush, then I can test it again. And yeah, still a bit more. So once the action is at the height you want it, you can adjust the intonation. And of course, having this magnetic pickup allows me to plug directly into the tuner here. So right, so that's my open E, and if I fret it at the 12th, it should be the same. Yeah, and that's pretty much spot on. Now if it's not spot on, if it's sharp, well then I need to file the saddle so that the string breaks a little bit further back. And if it's flat, I need to file the saddle so that the string breaks a little bit closer to the 12th fret or the nut. But as it happens, with that first pair of strings, that's spot on. Well, all 8 strings are on now. So what I'm just doing is a bit of kind of fine tuning up at this end to make sure that the pairs of strings are at the same height as each other. So if I put my finger there and fret it at the 2nd fret, and I can just compare the two. Yeah, and they look absolutely fine. Do it again here. Yeah, maybe that first string is a tad higher than the 2nd string, so I'll do that slot a wee bit deeper. I've already done these to make sure that they're equal. I must admit, this setting up of any instrument that I make seems to take me an inordinate amount of time. But of course, what you don't want are really any comebacks, do you? Once the instrument's gone out, so you really have to be fastidious at this stage. So the action, in my opinion, is pretty much perfect, spot on. Having sorted out the action, I then fine-tuned the intonation at the saddle here, as I said before, by filing some off the front, some off the back, changing where the string breaks. And I know now that that is the final position of the bridge. So you can see that I've taped around it. So what that will allow me to do now is to remove the saddle and then drill through that hole you saw earlier in the bridge into the body to run the wire for the undersaddled transducer. And as you can appreciate, you can't really do it until this stage, because drilling that hole in the wrong place would verge on the catastrophic, I think. So it's taken a while, but I'm very happy now with the action at the nut at the 12th fret. The saddle's been filed to make sure that the intonation is spot on. I've been playing with the Damasio pickup to try to balance out the output of the strings. So obviously needs to be a little bit higher on the treble side as opposed to the bass side, simply because of the mass of the strings. The piezo transducer's in, that's working fine. So yeah, generally happy now with the way that it's playing. So the next step is really to take everything off and prepare it for finishing. So yeah, I need to get on with that now, don't I? Well, I hope you found this episode of interest. So we know where we're going with the mandolin now, don't we? But what I would like to say is thank you very much for all of your interest, the comments that you've been leaving, etc. And they're all greatly appreciated. So yeah, until the next video, you take care and we'll see you again soon. Cheers!